Hey everybody, it's Cynthia here from River City Yarns. I'm in my home. This is my new studio during the time of COVID-19, and I thought it would be a good time to put up a video on our YouTube channel showing you how to crochet. So if you've wanted to learn how to do crochet but haven't had the time, I would kind of feel like now is the time for it. So join me for the next little bit of time and I will show you how to get hooked on this great craft. Okay, to get started with crochet, we need a few things. One of the first things you need, of course, is some yarn. And at the store, when we teach our crochet class, we recommend that people use 100% wool. I've got here our Epic yarn. This is 100% wool. It's a worsted weight yarn. That means that it's a medium weight yarn. And worsted is a category that is used to describe the thickness of this particular kind of yarn. The other word for it, or the numbering system that's used in the US, would place this yarn at a number 4. So a medium weight yarn. We like 100% wool because it has some elasticity, and we find that when people are learning to knit or crochet, you need a yarn that's got a little bit of elasticity or give to it, because we do tend to work a little bit tightly when you begin a new thing. The other thing that you need, of course, is a crochet hook. So I have here one of the most popular hooks that we have in the store, the Amour hook by Clover, and people like this hook because of the handle. Having an ergonomic handle in your hand is really nice, again, particularly when you're starting a new craft, because there is a tendency to hold things very tightly and to cramp your hand. So this nice handle is very beneficial to newbie crocheters. I have a pair of scissors. The little short pair of sharp scissors is good for cutting your yarn after you weave in your ends. And I have a little point protector on the end of my scissors, and this keeps these really sharp tip scissors from wrecking my little notions bag or poking my fingers. Wool needle is important. This is a needle that you will use to weave in your ends, and if you can see on mine, it has a large nylon loop for an eye, so it's really easy to thread. And the tip of the needle is more or less blunt, which means that it's not super sharp, but that's okay because we're just going to use it to weave in ends. And finally, I have 2 locking stitch markers. When you're working with crochet for the first time, you're going to find that you need to do a lot of counting, and we're going to tackle a question about where should the last stitch go on each row. So these 2 little stitch markers are going to come in very handy. All right, let's get started. The first question that you will probably tackle is, how do you find the center of the ball? Sometimes it's nice if you can pull from the center of the ball, because then you don't have to keep unwrapping the yarn from the outside of the ball. But I find actually that in these circumstances, pulling from the outside is usually easier than trying to find the inside. Now, in this ball of yarn, you can see that there's a little strand here that goes to the inside. So I'm going to pull that out. That is the outside strand of the ball. And oh, and look, when I pulled it out, the inside came out as well. To set a good example, I'm going to tell you, don't worry, it's always nice if this happens, but just in case it doesn't, I'm going to push this back in the inside and use the outside of the ball just to demonstrate that it doesn't really matter which side you pull from. What's more important is that you have access to it and you don't pull out a huge, sometimes it's like you pull out a baby ball of yarn from the middle and then you end up wrapping it around the outside anyway. So I'm just going to say to you, relax, pull from the outside of the ball. Don't fuss too much about trying to find the inside. It's all good. Going to start by making a slip knot. A slip knot is going to be your very first stitch. And so to make a slip knot, what I recommend in the beginning is that you use 3 fingers, hold the tail of your yarn in your right hand, wrap that tail of the yarn around your 3 fingers, leaving a pretty good tail, about 6 to 10 inches. So you see that I've got the yarn wrapped around my fingers like this. Now what I'm going to do to make the slip knot is take the yarn that's laying on top, crossing over, and I'm going to pop that yarn into the loop that's on my finger. So here I go. And I just pop that loop inside the, underneath the one that was below it. And I'm going to pull that loop off my fingers, hold both ends of the yarn, the tail and the part attached to the ball, and pull it snug. And this is a very large slip knot, but you can see that if I pull on the end of it, I can make it smaller. So in the beginning, and to pull it out, you just take either end of the yarn and pop, pull it out. In the beginning, I find it easier to do this over 3 fingers because you make your slip knot nice and big. So here we are again, just wrapping it around my fingers. Take your finger and tuck the top loop under the bottom loop, and pull it off your fingers, making a slip knot. And then make it smaller or pull it out all together and try it again. If you want to make it smaller, this is the way that I normally do it. You can wrap the yarn around just one finger like this, and then taking your index finger, take the yarn that's on top and tuck it inside the loop that's on your finger. Pull that loop off your finger, and voila, you have a slip knot. The slip knot goes onto your crochet hook, and you snug it up so that it's not super tight, it's not super loose. You can see that I have just a little bit of space underneath the hook where the slip knot base is, but it slides easily on my hook. Now, to crochet, we hold the crochet hook in the right hand, and you hold the yarn in the left hand. It's easiest to work with crochet if you can tension the yarn over your finger a little bit. So I'm just going to take the yarn and put it over top of my index finger like this. So I'm not holding it in any particular way. The most important thing is that the yarn is coming over your index finger. Then with your thumb and your middle finger, you're going to just pinch the knot that is the base of your slip knot, and this allows you to control the stitch that's on your crochet hook. So the first stitch that we're going to learn is called the chain stitch, and so I'm just going to describe what's happening with my hook, and then I'm going to show it to you. My hook is, I'm holding my hook with the flat part of the hook on my thumb and the round part of the hook on my fingers. But if you don't have a hook like this, basically have the hook part of the needle, the front of the hook part is facing me. I take the hook and I use it to draw the yarn through this loop that's on my hook right now. So that's why it's important for the middle finger and the thumb to kind of pinch that knot here. So here we go. You take your hook and you go under the yarn on your finger, and then you make a slight turn with your hook towards your thumb as you draw it through this loop on your hook. So my hook has gone under the yarn, and now watch how my hook rotates, and I pull that yarn through that first stitch that was on my hook. Now my thumb and my middle finger move up to pinch the stitch that I've just made, and again I take my crochet hook and go under the yarn, rotate the hook slightly towards my thumb, and pull it back through the loop that's on the hook. We've made 2 chain stitches. So now, very briefly, my finger touches here, my thumb and my middle finger move up onto the stitch I just made, and my hook goes down, grabs the yarn, pivot the hook slightly towards your thumb, and pull it through the stitch that's on your crochet hook. So the motions are move up with your thumb and your finger, take the hook and go under the yarn that's on your index finger in your left hand, swirl the hook slightly towards your thumb, and pull it through the loop that's on the hook. This is called a chain stitch. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 chains so far. So I'm going to do 6 more so that I have 10 chains on my hook. Hook goes under, rotate the hook, pull it through the loop, fingers go up, hook goes under the yarn, rotate the hook, pull it through the loop, fingers go up, under, pull through, adjust, under, pull through, adjust, under, pull through, adjust. All right, so we've got our chain stitch, and I've got 10 chains in my chain stitch sequence here. How do I know? I can show you how to count your stitches so that you'll know when you've got 10 chain stitches. So if you look at your chain stitch, you can see that it has kind of two different sides. One is a flat side, and the other is a side that kind of has bumps or ridges on the back of it. And when I'm counting, I like to count the flat side. If I turn it this way, I think you can see that those stitches look to me a little bit like hearts, intertwined hearts, or you could see them as V's, the letter V stacked one on top of the other. And what I'm going to do to count my stitches is to count the V's. So if you look at this V right here above my thumb, that would be 1. And then the next one here is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I have 10 chain stitches on my hook. The 10th stitch is technically still on my hook. So before we work the next stitch, I'm going to mark that one so I know where to count from when I count my next row. And to mark the stitch, you can use a locking stitch marker or a closed stitch. You need to use a locking stitch marker. A closed stitch marker won't work because we need to unlock it later. But essentially what you do is you take your hook off, leaving the loop by itself, put your stitch marker over the loop, and then stick your hook back on. In this first row you have to be careful because the hook can fall right down your chain, but once you get more fabric there, it's not a problem. So keeping my thumb and my finger, my thumb and my middle finger will always be pinching the stitch right underneath the crochet hook, and my yarn needs to go over my index finger like this. So we're going to do the single crochet first. To do a single crochet, we're not going to work in the stitch that has the yarn coming out of it. That stitch is already taken right here. So you're going to work in the next stitch over. So the one right beside the stitch with the yarn coming out of it is the stitch we're going to work in. And this stitch, for now, we're just going to insert your hook into the middle of that stitch, and later on we'll talk about whether or not you should have one strand above the hook or two strands above the hook, but for now that doesn't matter. You're going to insert your hook into the next stitch, and I've just got one bar of yarn above my hook. I'll take it out and show you again. Here's the stitch. I'm going to insert my hook into the middle of that chain stitch. And then I'm going to, with my hook, grab the yarn that's back by my finger and rotate my hook around so the hook goes under the yarn. Rotate your hook slightly towards your thumb. Pull that loop through the chain stitch so that you now have 2 loops on your crochet hook. And then one more time you're going to take your hook and go under the yarn, rotate the hook around towards your thumb, and pull it through both loops that are on your crochet hook. This is much easier to do if your crochet is not too tight. So if you find that it's very difficult to pull your hook through, chances are you're just working a little too tightly. So loosen up a bit. Take your hook now and go into the next chain on the hook. So here you can see right here, this stitch has some work in it, so we leave that one alone. I'm going to the next chain right here, and you stick your hook through. So I've got 1 bar above the hook and 2 pieces of yarn below the hook. So I haven't split my yarn, but I've just split the stitch by sticking my hook through it. Take your hook under the yarn, rotate it towards your thumb, and pull that loop through to the front of your chain. And then take your hook and go under the yarn again, rotate it towards your thumb, and pull it through both loops that are on your hook. Notice that every time I do a new stitch, my thumb and my middle finger move to support my work. I'm now working on the 3rd chain, so you insert your needle, your hook, sorry, into the chain stitch, go under the yarn, pull the yarn through to the front of your work. My thumb and my middle finger move up to be just underneath those two loops. And then with your crochet hook, go under the yarn one more time, rotate towards your thumb and pull it through both loops that are on your hook. This is called a single crochet. So insert your hook into the next stitch, go underneath the yarn in the back, pull the yarn forward to the front so that you have two loops on your hook. Then take your hook and go under the yarn one more time, rotate down towards the base of those stitches and pull it through both loops on your hook. In through the front of the chain stitch, grab the yarn from the back and pull it through to the front of the chain stitch. Then take your hook and go under the yarn, rotating it downwards and pull through both loops on your hook. If you can't get through both loops right away, it's fine to take your hook and go under the yarn and pull through one loop and then through the next loop. But try to get your tension so that when you pull your yarn through both loops on your hook, you're not fighting with it. All right, work your way towards the end of your chain. You will get to the end of your chain stitch when you'll feel a little knot right at the end here, and there'll be one little chain stitch left at the end. So we're going to put your hook through that last chain stitch, bring the yarn through to the front, take your hook under the yarn and pull it through both loops on your hook. All right, let's see how many stitches we have now. I'll make this loop big and take my crochet hook out. So you see where my stitch marker is. That's the first single crochet that we made. So I'm going to count from here. And again, I'm counting those V's along the top of my single crochets. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we started with 10 chains, but we're ending with 9 single crochets, and that's because one of those chains was used up in the little turn that we made here at the beginning. So I now have 9 stitches that I'm working with. I'll put my hook back in, and now we're going to do the next row of crocheting. So to do your next row, we need to work from the right to the left. So you're simply going to flip your work around like this so that it's now, your hook is on the right hand side and you're going to work back across from the right to the left. We're going to work 9 more single crochets in the top of the single crochets on the previous round, and this time you're going to take your hook and you're going to go under the whole V, the 2 strands of yarn that are at the top of this first single crochet. So again, if I show you here, this is the side view, but if I tilt it over like this, you can see on the top there is a V right here, and you're going to take your hook and put it right under both legs of that V. You're going to grab the yarn in the back by taking your hook and going under the yarn, and you pull the yarn through to the front of your work or the forward side so that you have 2 loops on your hook. Then take your hook and go under the yarn again, rotate it towards your thumb and pull through both loops on your hook. I'm going to back up for a second to show you that it's very easy to pull your yarn out in crochet and go back. So if you make a mistake, don't worry about that. But I also wanted to remind you to put a marker on here because that's an important part of this process. It's really difficult in the beginning to know where your first and last stitches go, particularly your last stitches. So when you turn your work, take your locking stitch marker and place it over the stitch. Put your hook back on, and we'll do that first stitch again. So hook is towards the front of your work. Your first row of single crochet is now pointing to the left, and we're going to work from the right to the left. So I take my hook and I put it under both sides of the V that you can see on the top of your work. Take your hook through and grab the yarn by going under it and pulling it through to the front of your work. When you have 2 loops on your hook, take your hook and go under the yarn, rotate it towards the base, and pull through both loops on your hook. So the only difference between this row and the last row is where you place your hook. And again, I'll just remind you that if you tilt your work towards you, you'll see that there's a V on the top of your work, and you want to put your hook through both legs of the V. Okay, from the side view, you'll find yourself, there's a little hole right there, and you can just slide your hook underneath both of those legs. Once your hook is through, go under the yarn, pull it through to the front so that you have 2 loops on your hook. Take your hook under the yarn once more and pull it through both loops on your hook. So work your way back across your first single crochet row, and then when we get to the stitch with the stitch marker in it, that will be the last stitch in your row. So when I get to this last stitch, I'll unlock my stitch marker and take it out, and then I will work 1 single crochet in that last stitch. So I've got my 2 loops on the hook, I pull this loop through, and then I take my hook out, lock my stitch marker once again, place it on the loop, put my hook back in, and turn the whole thing around so that again we're working from the right to the left, and the first stitch is going to go right in here. So just under the stitch marker, there's the first stitch of the row. So you insert your hook, draw your yarn through, then yarn over again and draw through both loops on your hook. So single crochet is just working back and forth. If you don't have stitch markers, or you don't want to use stitch markers, you could just count. So once you've established the number of stitches that you have, and in this case it's 9, then you can count until you made 9 stitches, and then turn and work your way back, always working on the same number of stitches. Otherwise, your edges, your piece is likely to get larger. Now in this case, I'm just going to work in the same spot that my stitch marker is in, and then I'll take this stitch marker out, lock it back up, place it on the stitch, and turn. See how easy that is? So the stitch markers really make, I find the stitch markers make an incredible difference in making sure that your edges are nice and straight. Well, this is the single crochet, so work on this for a little bit, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to do a half double crochet. All right, so here I am at the end of my last row of single crochet. I'm going to put my last single crochet in where my marker is and take my marker out, and the next row will be half double crochet. So let's change this up a little bit and work on a new stitch. Half double crochet is a little taller than a single crochet, so we begin with a turning chain. Do you remember how to do a chain? You take your hook and go under the yarn and then pull that yarn through the loop that's on your hook. We're going to do 2 of those, so under the yarn. Oh, before we do the second one, I'm going to put my marker on so I remember where my last stitch goes. So I've done 1 chain, now I'm going to take my hook under the yarn and do my second chain. The half double crochet begins with a turning chain, and the turning chain counts as 1 half double crochet. So I like to put the marker in just where the top of that stitch is. Now turn your work. When you're doing a half double crochet, this 2 chain turning chain counts as your first stitch. So instead of working right in that very first stitch here, we're actually going to move over to the second stitch. Again, that's because this turning chain is going to count as the first half double crochet. So you're going to work in the second chain from the second stitch in from the edge of your work. My thumb is just to the left of that second stitch. To do a half double crochet, we begin slightly differently than a single crochet. We begin with a yarn over. So you're going to take your hook and rotate it under the yarn, and then you're going to go through the stitch on the row below, remember that you're just going under the first 2 bars of the stitch. Then you're going to put your hook under the yarn in the back and pull the yarn through to the front so that you have 3 loops on your hook. Then yarn over a 4th time and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. So the chain 2 is your first half double crochet. There's the second half double crochet. Let's do it again. Yarn over first by rotating your hook under the yarn. Then take your hook and put it through the stitch on the row below. Put your hook under the yarn, grab it from behind and pull it through to the front so that you have 3 loops on your hook. Then take your hook under the yarn, rotate the hook towards your thumb and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Right, let's do it again. Yarn over, go through the stitch on the row below, come up in the back, grab the yarn in the back and pull it through to the front so that you have 3 loops on your hook. Then take your hook under the yarn, yarn over one more time, and you're going to pull through all 3 loops on your hook. If you need to, you can pull through one at a time. 1, 2, 3. One more time, yarn over, put your hook through the stitch on the row below, grab the yarn in the back and pull it through to the front, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over one more time and pull through 1, 2, 3 loops on your hook. Continue to do this to the end of the row where you put your marker in from before. Okay, I'm at my last stitch here, so I'm going to yarn over, put it through the single crochet on the row below, yarn over in the back and pull it through. There's my 3 loops. Yarn over one more time and pull through all 3 loops. I'll take my marker out here. And remember that we chain 2 at the end, so you're going to chain 1, put your marker on, chain the second one, and turn. Again, you're not working in the first stitch you're not working in the first stitch on the edge because the chain 2 takes that place. You're going to move over to the second stitch in the row, yarn over, put your hook through the work, yarn over in the back and pull through, then yarn over and pull through all 3 stitches on your hook. Okay, and the last stitch goes into the top of the chain 2. So if you yarn over, you can use your locking stitch marker to help you find the space, or take it out so it's out of the way. Yarn over and go through that chain right at the edge, yarn over again, and then pull through all 3. Okay, now this is the quote-unquote proper way to do a half double crochet stitch, but I do find that chain 2 at the edge leaves a bit of a hole on either side. So try it, see what you think. Oops, missed my thing there. And then I'll show you an adaptation which is not strictly legal, but which I like better. So I've got my chain 2, I'm turning, skipping the first stitch in, working in the second stitch, and maintaining my count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then my last one goes in the top of the chain 2. It's tricky getting in there. Okay, so here's that. So that was my 9th stitch. So here's Cynthia's adaptation because I don't like those holes. Instead of chaining 2 at the beginning, I chain 1 and then put my marker on. And I do work my first half double crochet in the first stitch at the edge. So there's the first one, second, third, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me just count here again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I have to do one more in this turning chain on the row below, but after this I won't. So there's my 9th stitch, chain 1, put my marker on, turn, and I like to work the first half double crochet in the first stitch from the edge, so I'm going to do that again. There's 1, 2, 3, 8, excuse me, 9. So I feel that this method works a little more evenly, and I don't have those holes at the end. But this is the way that all conventional teaching methods have you do is skip that first stitch and chain 2 at the beginning. So if you want to cheat like me, then again, what you're going to do is at the beginning of the row or the end of the row, chain 1 as your turning chain. I'm going to mark that. And then turn your work, beginning in the first stitch at the edge, yarn over, put your hook through the stitch, pull the yarn from the back to the front so that you have 3 loops on your hook, and pull through all 3 loops. Working your way across in every stitch, count so that you have the right number of stitches across the top, and you will work your last half double crochet in the top of the last half double crochet of the row below. I just feel like this is a little neater than the conventional method, but that's Cynthia's cheat. Okay, chain 1, put your marker on, work in the top, in the first stitch of the row. Okay, carry on working on your half double crochet, whichever way you decide to do it, and I will meet you in the next video where we'll talk about double crochet and combining single and double crochet. Happy crocheting, everybody.